going through that. Just kind of profitable to kind of just dig through it, see what your observations are, underline some stuff, get some encouragement on how God's Word can be applied to our lives. So, I know not all of you really know the story, so I just kind of want to go through kind of what I've been through, what we've been through as a church over the last year. It was interesting that last men's retreat, I got the word that one of my youth leaders, Scotty Hazel, my dad and I had been walking with him, and he was diagnosed with cancer about a year and a half ago. And they had been doing chemo on him, and got the word on the retreat that none of the chemo had worked, and it was basically a matter of time in which he was going to pass. So we had to go tell his family that and stuff, and it's sad to go through that. I know Scotty was a drummer. He was in our praise team. He was one of the most popular teachers at Cedar Springs High School. I mean, they did a fundraiser for him. This was this guy. The Detroit Lions came, all right, to Cedar Springs High School and played a game to raise money. I got destroyed by, I forget which Lions guy it was, but he was huge. He just told me, he says, when I give you the look, Justin, you either step aside or I'm going to run you over. Corey Schlesinger, you guys remember that guy? Corey. He looked like a rhinoceros, man. He's just, did he? Yeah. Oh, I mean, you think you're a decent athlete, and then you go against some of these professionals, and you're just like, forget about it, you know. So it was a lot of fun. But anyways, I remember, I think it was Bob. I just had tears in my eyes, and I said, I don't, you know. The doctor said there's nothing they can do. So anyways, we went through that in July. Middle of July, he ended up passing. And my dad had been having some back spasms, some trouble last spring, and he literally was walking in Lansing, and he just stepped on an uneven pavement and kind of threw out his back, and it just kind of threw him off. And since then, last spring, he had been having very bad back spasms and stuff. So anyways, he'd been going to the doctor. They'd been doing different things to him, MRIs and stuff. They've been trying to do chiropractic work, all kinds of different things, but every time they did it, it just seemed like it was worse. And anyways, it's the day of the funeral, and we couldn't have it at our church. It was so big. It was at Cedar Springs High School. It was packed. And my dad the night before was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm just like, well, you want me to do this? You know, it's like you've ever been in this situation. And he says, I'm going to try to make it. And you could tell if then he went to the funeral, he was really hurting bad. He made it through it. But then I'll never forget the call that we got. Me and him were riding in my mom on the way home from the funeral. Doctor calls, and you know, you could tell Dad was kind of serious. We stopped and got a bite to eat, and Dad says, the doctor told me I have cancer. And I'm just like, you guys are kidding me. You know, this is after what we went through with Scotty and stuff like that. So at that point, his health started really, they wanted to do aggressive chemo on him, get things going. He was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer. And they had caught it kind of early, but not as early as they thought at first. At first they thought in stage 1, but it was actually stage 2. It only has 3 stages. So anyways, after that, it was pretty much, he was just heavy chemo, and I was kind of pushed into the challenging thing I was in is I was the associate pastor, senior pastor's out. Now it's kind of like, you got to step up, man, you know. So I was doing that as I'm trying to help him get out and stuff, and I remember just progressively things getting worse and worse and worse as he's doing the chemo. I mean, my mom had to give him this chemo. She had to put these gloves on because she couldn't even touch it with her skin. You know how nasty that is. You've got to swallow this stuff. And it was very hard to see. We were talking in our small group with Doug and Paul, this just your dad, your rock, you know. I mean, having to go through this is just gut-wrenching, you know? It's like, no, Dad, you're not supposed to be, you know, dealing with this stuff. So anyways, you know, just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and he was really looking forward to having surgery on his back to help repair his spine. They found that he had some major issues with his spine. Basically, he had the surgery September 10th of this past fall, and after the surgery, go talk with him. He says, I don't think anything changed. And basically, he says the doctors, when they opened him up, they thought his bones, the cancer had gotten into his bones were deteriorating. So it was just, and you could tell on his face that he was just so defeated at that point. And anyway, so I remember leaving that next morning. It's just it's a nightmare thinking about it. It's rainy, it's cold. 8:30 in the morning, my wife was at the Y. I'm at home with our little guy. It was my day off, and I get the phone call. My mom's frantic on the phone, crying, your dad's dead. And it was just like I dropped the phone, and I just sat in my living room. Graham's like, what's going on? My son, he's 4 years old. I still didn't believe it. She's like, I went in, and the dad, he's gone. So I get in the car, put my son in the car, drop him off at the Y, go to see him, and Dad had, you know, gone upstairs. He had a little pistol. He'd taken it and shot himself in the head. And left us a note, basically saying, you know, I love you guys. I know my faith is strong in Christ. I know that Christ covers all my sins. I know what I did was wrong. The doctors, you know, said they could do this and that, but I know my body and it just failed me. It's, you know, I might be able to live another month or two, but I know I'll see you guys again. And it was just like, oh wow, you know. So anyways, at that point, I just had sat there next to him. I had brothers there, and we just wept, cried, prayed. I knew when I called 911, the service would begin. I mean, it was like 10 past 5 and after that, I remember just thinking, wow, there's a funeral that's got to happen here. I'm the pastor now. I'm just like, all these thoughts going through my head. I'm like, Lord, why would you put me in this situation? Sunday's coming in 2 days. I got to get up in front of the people and preach. And it was just like, oh, it was just like so gut-wrenching just to experience that. It was tough. That first Sunday I had help. Dr. Ellie's one of our elders. He actually prepared the message, and I had help with the funeral and stuff. But it was hard. You think about, and we talked about this, like you think about when you talk as men together, you talk about like legacy. You guys hear that word often? Like, what's the legacy that you want to leave upon your children, upon your family? And imagine the disappointment I thought to the congregation. This was their pastor, their leader. This was my dad, the rock, you know. Why would he do this? And I remember asking our elders, just being honest with them, and they really came back and said, it just proves that we all have our weaknesses. Even us as they put pastors up on pedestals. It's like, no, we all have our weaknesses. And yeah, I went straight to the dad's doctor, and he was like, yeah, he was on, you know, morphine, he was on this, he was on that, he was going through chemo, he wasn't in his right mind when he did this. And I was like, well, he wrote a letter. You know, it seemed to be pretty logical what he wrote to us, you know. And he's like, I know your dad, he wouldn't do that, you know. And I was just really angry at Dad. I was angry at God. Like, man, you gave Satan this one, you know, he had been in ministry, he was going to be retiring. Satan just kicks you when you're down. And now, what's he going to be remembered as, you know? So that was kind of all the emotions that I was going through. What was very healing for me, as I said earlier, was as much as I wanted to hide and not talk to anybody, to go to church, pack, just to have people lay their hands on me, pray. The message was strong, and then also the funeral, just to see. I really think the legacy was every church that he was at, Trinity Baptist, church in Detroit, and then also Rockford Baptist he had. And then when he taught at the seminary, there were students that spoke, just telling of the ministry that he had had. So that was really comforting for me to just hear the impact that he had had. So anyways, but I want to kind of just dissect this passage a little bit. And background on the book of James, believed to be written by the brother of Jesus. And this is written after Jesus' death to the Jews who are scattered among the nations. And in verse 2, James issues a command and then goes on to explain why. He says, consider facing trials a joy. Now I brought these clamps here. All right? Pretty powerful things. And sometimes when you're going through trials, it feels like the pain and the pressure, it just keeps mounting, doesn't it? Have you guys ever had that? Like after Dad passed, I couldn't sleep. I mean, you guys had that? Where you're just tossing and turning. Your pain in your side, you're just like, oh man, this is like your mind's in a vice grip. And you just feel like these trials are just so overwhelming. I don't want to face anybody. Where do I turn to? And he says, consider facing them joy, not the trials themselves. And he says, when you face, all right, not if you are going to face trials. Like I said, my testimony, before this last year, I consider to have a pretty good life, right? I haven't had anything major happen like this, So it says we are going to face trials. Just think in your minds right now, what are some trials that you might be facing? Maybe it's some financial trials. Maybe it's some physical issues. Pretty young guy. I mean, I haven't had many physical problems. I remember a couple years ago, we're doing some fundraising for a mission trip, hot shot. We're doing some landscaping, and I pick up this huge log to prove how strong I am. And that night, my side was just like, oh wow, I could barely even stand up straight. Had to go to the doctor, get an MRI, and I had pulled an abdominal muscle. And he said, you can't do anything for a couple of months, Justin, So how just something like that so quickly can change, just that one phone call. We've heard from the doctor, that one phone call changed our family's life forever, right? When you face, in studying this, I love how you can look at how it's translated in the Greek. You can literally see here that when you face can also be translated when you fall into trials. Kind of interesting as I'm reading this actually was like that Dad actually literally walked and fell right into it. So you have times in life where you're walking along and you just don't even see it. It just hits you. You hit that hole. All right? Never forget, this was 3 years ago. There's a Thanksgiving parade downtown Grand Rapids a couple of days before Thanksgiving. And Jesse's family, my wife, they're from Miami, we're walking. And there's a lot of people around. And Jesse's mom actually stepped on a crack and we're walking in the parade. And she broke her ankle right there. Can you imagine that? We had thousands of... So, she's on the ground. I'm like, the band's coming right here. So we picked her up and we had to carry her the last half a mile. But I'm just like, wow, how embarrassing is that? But that's how life is. You can be walking along and then all of a sudden, bam, you just get hit. All right? Verse 3 answers the question, why? And you guys were able to go through this some. Because the testing of our faith produces perseverance. Faith is tested through trials, not produced by trials. Trials reveal what faith we truly have. You ever heard the saying, Christians are like tea bags? You never know what they're really made of until you put them in a little hot water. It's true, right? The testing of our faith gives us perseverance. Trials reveal what faith we have, not because God doesn't know how much faith we have, but so that our faith will be evident to ourselves and those around us. I mentioned some passages to some guys. Matthew 5, 10 through 12. You read that?
Yeah. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree, we've lived in a time here, at least in my life, where we really haven't been persecuted for our faith. But we can see here that, yes, I mean, you will have times where you are going to face opposition. You're going to face trials for your faith. 1 Peter 1, 6 through 9. Who had that?
In this you greatly rejoice, even though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been distressed by various trials, so that the proof of your faith, being more precious than gold, which is perishable, even though tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And though you have not seen him, you love him. And though you do not see him now, you believe in him. You greatly rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory, obtaining as the outcome of your faith the salvation of your soul.
Yeah. So just really keeping, being kingdom-minded, heavenly-minded. Hey, Jared just said this, I think, how short our lives really are, isn't it? I mean, it just how fast this life goes. Bob told me a YouTube clip of Francis Chan, the rope. Yeah. Remember that illustration? Yeah. If you got to check that out. It's pretty cool. How he just says how we have this huge long rope, and represents our life, and you know, we might live to 70, 75 years. And then we try to save for this little sliver of retirement, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And like our whole life, that's all we're, and it's just like, this rope goes on for eternity. What are you doing that'll last for all eternity? Is that what your whole life, you're in the rat race just for this little sliver of time when you have all eternity? So I think that's one thing to keep in mind, that we are only here for a short period of time, and to really everything we do, to really think of what did I do for Christ. I was at the Moody Pastors Conferences last week, and at Moody, every student had to read D.L. Moody's book. Did you guys have to do that back in the day?
We had to, but I didn't read it.
You didn't read it? Oh, Chris!
That's our leader.
That's your leader.
We're taking notes, Jared. We're taking notes.
Yeah.
And in the book it said D.L. would not let one day go by without sharing at least with one person about, Christ. And you're like, wow, how many of us haven't even done that once in our lifetime, you know? So really just to think about, hey, being kingdom-minded. 2 Corinthians 1. Yep. Stuart.
Blessed be God blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction, with the comfort with which ourselves are comforted by God. For as we share abundantly in Christ's sufferings, so through Christ we may share abundantly in comfort too. If we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation, and if we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which you experience when you patiently endure the same sufferings that we suffer. Our hope for you is unshaken, for we know that as you share in our sufferings, you will also share in our comfort.
So I think that God can use certain things that we go through to help us better minister to others. Ultimately, look at Christ. He went through a horrific death on the cross, humbled himself. I look at what I went through with Dad dying of cancer. How can I better use that to minister to others, to share my story with others when I'm doing hospital calls and dealing with families who are dealing with loved ones who are very sick, to say, hey, you know, I had to go through this, you know, and to say, hey, God, use this so that I can minister to others. And this is what it says here is that it says that it produces faith. And I had to ask myself, what really produces faith? What produces faith in our lives? I was in New Jersey for 5 years before I moved here, and it was tough. We were right outside of New York City. The just affluence that the kids there had so much money, they didn't need God. So it was tough. Like you don't need faith. We got everything, you know. We live in this huge house. We have cars. We have money. We have all this stuff. And I really think that what Christ says here is what produces faith. In Romans 10:17 says that faith comes from hearing the message. The message is heard through the word of Jesus Christ. So the answer is, as we hear and as we understand, as we trust God's word. So as we apply that to our lives. And this response to trials is not automatic. This is a choice that each one of us has to make. If we receive trials in unbelief and we let grumbling, then bitterness and discouragements come forth in our life, it's our choice of how we receive these trials. The other day I was at Mr. Burger. Has anybody been to Mr. Burger?
Oh, so
yeah,
so good.
There, you know? But I remember my wife and I were sitting there, and these older guys were behind us, probably in their mid-70s or so, and they were just complaining about this and that, and doctor's appointment, and then one guy said, oh, my landscaping guy messed up my sprinkler head, and then other. And there's one thing after another, and you're just like, wow, this is really depressing, you know?
That's what I have to look forward to.
Yeah, right?
Happy retirement.
Yeah. Is this what we do? I mean, we don't have to work, but we can sit at Mr. Burger and just complain about this and that. I'm just like, come on now, Lord, it's got to be better than that. So I just thought about that, how you can kind of see that. You can see kind of as you get older, as you've been through so much stuff. I mean, you young, you know, people, you're so naive. Wait till you go through this, and this, and you get bitter towards your older years in life. And this is where, you know, the Word says it's a choice that you can make. You can either grow through this experience, or you can just sit there and grumble about it, right? So anyways, look at verses 3 and 4. All right, I think of perseverance it talks about. Patience, verse 3 and 4. It's not a passive waiting. It's an active endurance. I think of it as like something that your life is like a marathon. It's an active just endurance. You're striving to, you know, keeping your eyes on Christ. You're running a marathon. It's not just the patience required to sit quietly in a doctor's waiting room. It's just, this is life, man. You need to run the race. This perseverance develops a maturity that nothing else can. I was talking about some of those kids in New Jersey. It's frustrating working with them, you know. I'm like, who would you rather work with that has a more mature mindset than you know, somebody who is just given everything on a platter, or the kid who has to work hard, has to deliver papers, mow the grass, and get that first car, a 93 Probe or something. I don't know what, you know.
2001 Alera.
Yeah, you get. Who's going to have more of an appreciation for that? More mature. So that's this just develops perseverance. That's what the trials do in our life. Spurgeon once said, I have looked back to times of trial with the kind of longing not to have them return. I mean, this last year I was like, no, I never would want to go through that. I'd never wish that on anybody. So he says, I'm not saying I want these to return, but to just feel the strength of God as I have felt it then. To hang upon God's powerful aim as I hung upon it then, and to see God at work as I saw him then. Isn't that fascinating? It's like when you just know God, there's no way I can go through this. Pastor Chris, I'm sure you've had this. I've worked on some sermons. I'm like, this is terrible. I don't know, and God's used it. But then I've had ones that I'm like, this is going to be incredible. People, and it's like, God's like, what are you doing? You're relying on yourself, or you're relying on me? And if that's where we're going, when you feel like you have it all together, that's when God's like, oh man, you don't get it, do you? You don't get it. When you have time, Spurgeon says, I don't want to go through that, but I just know the power that God gave me through that is just unbelievable. So, first thing, just of going through trials. Second thing is mentioned is lacking wisdom. Ask questions, you guys filling in this. Anybody have any encouragements that you found, that you wrote in for lacking wisdom? Want to share any that you wrote on your papers? Bob looks like he's in deep thought there.
I said, he is so loving that he gives us wisdom in our mess. We don't have to come to him all put together to get it.
Yeah.
He desires us to come when we're broken,
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's okay.
Right. Very good.
I said be careful what you wish for. It's kind of a statement because you ask him, as long as you don't have the doubt there, it says he might give it to you, but the wisdom might come out of suffering. As it's referencing, or
that's true.
the wisdom gained might show yourself. I don't know. It might make you go, I had it all wrong all along, and it might humble you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Anybody from our group have anything you want to share? Yeah.
He won't mock us or make fun of us or shame us for not knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. God gives wisdom generously to all without finding fault. And I thought Bob last night, we beat ourselves up. He's not going to throw all our faults at us. He's like, okay, you're coming to me wanting wisdom. I will give that to you. I found this actually. This is just a Bible right here. This was actually in my dad's office. And I just thought, this is just 1875.
You need to get that a praise.
Yeah, I know. That's what I thought. I mean, it's got pictures in it and everything that are like hand-drawn and stuff in it. But I looked at this and I just thought, man, what wisdom God has given us in His Word. It's just phenomenal. If anybody lacks wisdom, let him ask me. Wisdom is needed in times of trial. So many things, so many decisions need to be made in an emotional charged environment. Right after this thing happened with Dad, I don't want to do the funeral. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. But it's this and that, and what Mom, and all these different things. You feel like you have so many things coming at you. I'm just like, I can't. I just feel like giving up. I can't deal with this, But these are decisions that we're given. And a lot of times when we're going through trials, we need to make some tough decisions. We're told to ask God, where do you turn? Where do you turn? I know I talk to my wife. I mean, a spouse. Just seek wisdom there. So many times we turn to books, blogs, social media. Don't neglect prayer. We've been hitting that a lot. This weekend. I was really just thinking about that and this last week of how, and I was really hit hard this past week at the Pastors Conference. There was a speaker that went up there and he says, pastors, we did a survey, Barna, across the country, and just a conviction that hit me. He says, as pastors, we'll pray, with our congregation, we'll pray with small, Bible studies, but how much time in prayer do you spend in a week? They put a survey of 20,000 pastors around the country. The average pastor prays for 17 minutes. And I was like, that was just, that's 17 minutes for own spiritual. These are the pastors leading our congregations across. It's like, man, you read of these pastors back in the day that would wake up at 4 in the morning and pray till 7 a.m. just before they started the day. And I think that's a good thing for all of us. Just to say, hey, how much time are we truly spending on our hands and knees to God in prayer? So other things that we have are not bad in themselves, but just make sure that we ask God for wisdom. As simple as it seems, it so often gets forgotten, doesn't it? Just pray, stay in the Word. True wisdom will always be consistent with God's wisdom. Verse 6 tells us to believe and not doubt when you ask for wisdom. Trials will rock your world. Trials will rock your world. Nothing seems stable at that time, but without faith you become one with the wave instead of one who walks upon the waves. Isn't that the picture of just Jesus in the storm? And if you're not walking in step with God, with Christ, you're just getting slammed, right? But Christ can walk you through even the most difficult times. So, lacking wisdom, where do we turn? To Christ, the Bible, prayer. Next, we look at humble circumstances. And I want you guys to just think when you were younger, maybe think of your college days. I've actually had this jar of pennies. There was a lot more since I was in high school. My wife bought me a gumball machine this last Christmas, and my kids steal pennies out of this to get the gumball. Well, Jake too. He comes in my office. But I want you guys to just think of some humble circumstances maybe that you've been where it's been tough, where you just felt like, wow, I'm in a real tight spot, whether financially or this and that. I just think of back in college, just trying to get enough money to go one semester at a time, surviving off of J's and G's in Chicago, burgers. But I want you guys to think about that. I don't know if anybody wants to share or anything like that, but just a time in your life where you just felt like you were just really humbled. Does anybody have any thoughts?
Remember when we first got married and living in that first apartment, I was in the National Guard, working for a plumber, and I was working at the Chinese restaurant that night, cleaning up. I still couldn't pay my rent, and still have enough money at the end of the week to buy groceries. And we wound up on food stamps for a short time.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about humbling experience?
Yeah. I know.
You have to go down to the office and apply when you got parents who are working full time and have always provided for themselves. And
yeah.
That was about as humbling as you get to have to go do that.
Right. Yeah, I know. But you look back and appreciate it. Don't just what you went through and
make you appreciate every single thing that you are able to have.
Yeah.
Blessing.
Yeah.
Blessing it's given.
Yeah.
Means so much more because you know where you could be.
Right. Yeah.
Without the blessings that it's given.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
I was a teenager that knew everything, so when I got kicked out of my house and found myself sleeping on couch cushions in someone's living room,
yeah,
and not having a job or a license, having to work at just a restaurant in this shady part of town,
mm-hmm.
it was just man, it woke me up.
Right. Yeah.
But I wouldn't change it for anything. I think that really pushed me to
Those characters.
be a man and
Yeah.
be this
Yeah.
kid kind of man.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'll share two real quick, a real light-hearted one. One, every time you have to tell your wife that you were wrong and she was right. Humbling experience.
Every time.
And number two, anytime your kid goes into the hospital and you can't help.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be in the
I know.
you know? It's just, like, anytime, or even a parent, a kid has to
That's tough. You're like, Lord, bring it on me, man. I'm a kid. You know, God take this in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
When you
exactly.
see your kids in pain, and yeah. So. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I was. This is kind of humorous too. I was last week at the conference, and there was a pastor there that started up a congregation in Raleigh, North Carolina, right where Duke is, North Carolina. He said within a year, his congregation went from about 50 to over 500. But they were all college students. So he says at the end of that year, his budget had only gone up $13. And he had grown by 450, but they're all college kids. Here's what he said. He says, actually, they got, no joke, he says, one college student put an Egg McMuffin in the offering. And there was a sign on it with Acts chapter 3, verse 6, says, silver or gold I do not have, but what I have I give to you. So I just thought of the times when you, and I know I was going over this with my wife, and she says, you know, Justin, in the U.S., we really don't have, I mean, even the poorest of poor have it so much better than a lot of people in comparison around the world. But we can just think of times when we've been humbled. It's good for us, isn't it? And verse 9 says to really, take pride in his high position. Christ just marvels in that when he says, hey, when you guys are humbled, you can take pride in my high positions. Matthew 23, verse 11 and 12 says, God will humble you if you like to promote yourself, if you like to hype yourself up. We watch athletics nowadays, and it's sad, man. Everybody's got their own brand to promote, and they're just all about them, their shoes, this and that. And you're just like, what are they portraying to our kids? It's just all about them, all about the big contract, all about this stuff. But I love, if you humble yourself, God will exalt you. That's what he says. 1 Timothy 6 says, don't fall into the trap of wanting money. Philippians 4 says, be content in every situation that you are put in. So I just want you to think about what different humbling experiences that God's allowed you to go through, and how have you used them for Christ to exalt you in that, and what a testimony is for others to see what Christ can do through that. Then we have temptations. Temptations. I have these fishing lures here to kind of represent some of the temptations that we go through times in life. And I know that we were just talking in our small group. I was sharing with the men just raising kids. My oldest is 10. It's like this. It's just kind of discouraging thinking of the world that they're growing up in. Isn't it scary? I mean, you think about what we had, but it's just like everywhere. Internet's just like a whole new ball game. And I talk with my wife, and it's like, how do we do it? How do we prevent our kids from seeing some of this junk out there? How do we prevent them from doing this?
Don't buy a computer.
Yeah. So this is one of the biggest frustrations that I had with Dad. I mean, with him, I was angry at God. I said, why did Satan, you hit him when he was down? You know, I mean, you really hit him with when he's down. His legacy, I was so discouraged, like his legacy is forever ruined. And I was so encouraged by men of the church saying, no, that's not going to paint your dad's legacy for the rest of his life. We all have mistakes. We all make them. That was, we all think at times. We think worldly. And there's times when we think from a spiritual perspective. He was thinking, I know where I'm going. The doctor's giving me a month. I want to get there. I don't want to be here for another month, miserable. You know? So in that one moment of weakness, unfortunately it was his last, Satan got him. You know? And that's what we really have to pray for. And when we talk about what's the root of temptation, does somebody have Hebrews chapter 2? Did I ask somebody to read that?
17.
Yes, if you could read that.
For this reason he had to be made like his brothers in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. Because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Therefore, holy brothers who share in the heavenly callings, fix your thoughts on Jesus, the apostle and high priest whom we confess.
Mm-hmm. So we have encouragement. Christ, he's been through it. So he was fully man, fully God. It blows our mind, but he went through it all, so he can sympathize with us. And we look at really what the root of temptation is. Look in Genesis. I mean, Satan tells Eve, you're not going to die. For God knows when you eat from it, your eyes will be open. You will be like God, knowing good and evil. We know he can throw his lies at us all the time. And he tries to feed us these thoughts. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, we mentioned that a little earlier. Paul with the thorn in the flesh. He's just praying, God, take this away from me. Come on. My grace is sufficient, God says. He delights in our weakness. Right? So when you're tempted, what do you tend to do? Sometimes we cave. Sometimes we resist for a little while, then we cave. Then we rationalize and we, cave. But then other times, God says, hey, have my word memorized in your mind. Pray, stay in constant prayer so we can just flee from temptation when it does come. So these are just some thoughts here. I mean, this verse really sheds light onto, I think, many different issues that we are all going through. Each one of these specific things. I want to just read a couple of stories that I have here in closing. John Eldridge, he tells a story of a Scottish discus thrower from the 19th century. He lived days before professional trainers and developed his skills alone in the Highlands. He made his own discus from the description he read in a book. What he didn't know was that the competition discus was made of wood with an outer rim of iron. His discus was made of pure metal, 4 times heavier than the ones used by his would-be challengers. This committed Scotsman trained day after day, laboring under the burden of extra weight. He marked the record distance and kept working until he could throw that far. And think about that. When he arrived at the competition, he was handed this official wooden discus. He threw it like a little tea saucer. He just shattered the records. He set all kinds of new records. And for many years, none of his competitors could even come close to him. As Eldridge reflected on the story, he said, that's how you do it. When God gives us these trials, these great burdens, take them as God's using these to strengthen us in a miraculous way. The last one's kind of a humorous one. I thought I'd just read it, and it says here, one day a farmer's donkey fell down into a well. Some of you guys might have heard this one. The animal cried piteously for hours as the farmer tried to figure out what to do. Finally, he decided the animal was too old and the well needed to be covered up anyways. It just wasn't worth it to retrieve the donkey, so he invited all his neighbors to come over and help him. They all grabbed a shovel and began to shovel dirt into the well. At first, the donkey realized what was happening. What are you guys doing, He's crying out. Then, to everyone's amazement, he quieted down. A few shovel loads later, the farmer finally looked down the well and was astonished at what he saw. With every shovel of dirt that hit his back, the donkey was doing something amazing. he would shake it off and take a step up. As the farmer's neighbors continued to shovel dirt on top of the animal, he would shake it off and take a step up. Pretty soon, everyone was so amazed as the donkey stepped over the edge of the well and just trotted right off. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? How God just gives us these different experiences, these burdens. They're unpleasant. We despair. Sometimes we cry. Sometimes we're angry. I mean, I was angry at Dad. I was angry at God. The burden. It was just too much, you know. But we must take heart. We must always have a deep sense of joy, pure joy, because the burden is producing perseverance. Perseverance is producing maturity. Neither of these virtues so prized by God would ever be ours without the burden that he gives us. Close here. Billy Graham once said, "Mountaintops are for views of inspiration, but fruit is grown in the valleys." Fruit is grown in the valleys. I mean, it's good to have those mountaintop experiences. This is great. Here, feel like we're at it. You know, we're just getting inspired. We're learning from one another, and inspiration. But fruit is grown in the valleys. So my challenge, I'll ask Jared to come on up here. He's going to close us in a couple of songs. Is can we, going through these experiences, can we really consider this pure joy? Let's bow together in prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for this time together. We just thank you. We know that each one of us has gone through